Today's the day. We got a bunch of rain overnight and this morning, so this looks like a huge mess, but I was already made the lift all the way out so that we can get this first post removed. I think once we get that done, we could probably bring the lift in the inside. We're gonna get the header on this first bay, and what we're doing is we're using these 14-inch LVLs. The engineer said 2 of those for each opening should suffice. So we'll get those done, kind of like what we did here. The only difference is now that we are basically done, instead of having 12-foot height, we're gonna have 12-foot minus a 14-inch header. And I think it will actually look better, because what we're gonna do is when we run this header up here, we're gonna do a double LVL on each side of this column. And then we're gonna wrap the same rib steel that we've got on the sidewall, we're gonna do up here on the inside and outside. So from the outside, it'll look almost like just a bunch of garage door headers, and then same from the inside. I think it'll trim up real nice, it'll finish real nice. If only we would have known or had the forethought. Hindsight is always 20/20. Once they saw, you know, the spacing on these posts, realized that probably 10 foot was a mistake. I wish I would have thought about it too. It's just as much my fault, but we're gonna be able to make it right. Or make it better. I wouldn't say wrong, it wasn't wrong. What we're doing is we're ripping down a bunch of blocks so we can make up our header, but we need to rip it down because an LVL is 1 3/4 inches, and we only want a reveal of 1.5 inches. So when it goes through where these blocks are going to be at, we took basically a 1/4 inch off of both sides, so that our final dimension is 8.5. This is cordless, so not being paid or whatever to promote Milwaukee. I just got this and we're just giving it a go. We got the 12-volt battery. I've already been ripping a ton of stuff, so I used it the other day to do all the window trims, but super lightweight. It just comes right in. It's great for this quick stuff. Sure beats using a circular saw with a guard, or a guide, I should say, sorry. Bush Fix 101, Greg. Always got a phone call. Hello, this is Kyle. Back to our bush fix. And what we're doing is we're taking this block and we are lagging it in with some monster GRK structural screws, and we're going to use this to fasten to the post that's behind here. You know, we're not carrying a whole lot of weight because everything above here is actually supported on this post. We might try to make some sort of an angle bracket out of some steel just for extra support. There we go, first beam is done. The lighting is horrible, but hopefully you can appreciate what we did here. And we're gonna span this section next. And then what we'll do here, since this beam was all built up in the soffit, we couldn't really do that without taking everything off, the roof off, everything, and really getting in there and chopping up our trusses. Didn't want to do that. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and frame in some material just to give it the look of this. And then, you know, this will be rib steel. So same steel as this. That'll just kind of turn the corner. It'll get capped. But we're gonna do what I'm kind of nervous to do only a little bit, because it's no different than that bay. I feel good. So time to take that post out. I've already disconnected it. I can move it. No doubt there's gonna be weight on it, but how much I don't know. I always like to just run the saws through, and if it pinches the blade real bad, then we know there's a lot of weight on it, or at least that it's really tight. I guess whatever. Hey, where's the super sawzall at?
Probably in your shop.
Oh yeah, it's in my shop. Not too bad. I expected there to be something. Kind of had to be something on it. See? Now we're going to cut it off up there, and it's ready for trim. Nice. The other cool thing is what we're going to do, we're going to hook some bolts up to that, yank it with the Kubota. If it works, we might have to hook up to something bigger of the customers. But I just really want to show everybody, because haters going to hate, this bracket set in concrete with rebar without a J at the bottom. It ain't coming out of the concrete. This will get pulled out of the ground long before this dislodges from that concrete. Mark my words, I don't know yet. I might eat them. Probably not. Definitely made a difference out here. So once that guy's gone, that'll be really nice. And we'll just continue this steel right down. Like 3 big door openings, 3 big 20-foot door openings. Half-inch bolt got bent a little bit. So I'm telling you, you do not need J-hooks at the bottom of this rebar. It's not getting pulled out before this whole concrete pier gets pulled out. Now while you're watching us finish off this detail on this header that we've created, the steel inside, outside, the wraps, the soffit, the fascia, I just want to clarify that I'm not an engineer. No doubt that most engineers are going to require some rebar in the pier and maybe a J-hook on the bottom of the bracket. I don't know. But what I do know is that I've done many buildings that were based off of an engineered print, and I build based on those specifications. Not every building do we have engineered because most customers aren't going to pay for it because there isn't a requirement for specific prints or certain specs. So we try to overbuild everything, and what I do is I base everything that I do off of the engineered prints that I have had to come up with, specifically when I've done commercial work inside city limits, and I've done some really big buildings that required engineering, and I just kind of replicate that and put it towards these other buildings, knowing that I'm at least overdoing it. And maybe that could be wrong, but that's the way I do it, and I don't know. I mean, as I grow, maybe I'll bring an engineer on board and see what I can do. But if I go to a local builder supply where they sell building packages, they're going to be a lot less chintzy, or a lot more chintzy and a lot less constructed, I think, based on what I've been experiencing than what we're building. Now, with all that being said, enough talk of that. It's just, obviously I get a lot of comments, questions, responses from people that either know more than me or think they know more than me, one or the other. And that's fine. I graciously welcome that, and I hope to learn myself. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of background on how we build, where we come up with our designs. I do it mostly in my head, and I base it off of these prints that I have used in the past. What we were waiting on was this trim right here. What I wanted was a special custom trim that's going to cap the ceiling steel, and it's going to come up the edge. Then what we're going to do is we're going to run our soffit J channel right here on this spot, and that will accept our soffit. Then we'll be able to put our fascia on, and then finally do our gutter. Well, there we go. Now that might make more sense what we're doing. We got this piece of flashing here that's capping the ribs, and really this was just to get a little bit of definition, a little bit of detail line that I'm hoping pays off for all the extra work instead of just running this ceiling. You can see that detail now. I think it'll work. And we got our post trim that's going to cap this off, and then it will get gutter. that is why that overhangs. That'll cap our gutter, makes it look nice and clean. I think this is gonna look nice. So what we do on all of our end fascias, or the fascias that go on the end, I always make an 1.5 inch mark, square that down. I use the appropriate snip for my cuts, which here I used reds, and I do that so that it pushes this side down, and that's so it bends underneath nice and clean. I'm gonna go ahead and snip the hem off, and then what I like to do is just take off a little sliver of a triangle. And the reason I do that is so when I take my benders, get right on my line, I can get a nice crisp 90 degrees to go around my corner. There we go. Had to stop recording for a second because A, I was frustrated and I needed Greg's help. Now you can see we got the trim on here. We got our fascia trim. We've got our custom trim here that's gonna cover the ceiling. All we have left to do right here is we'll bend up another piece of J-channel that will cap this off, put a nice little miter on it, and this corner's done. And then when I get those post wraps, we'll come and put those on. So without showing too much sunlight, there's that final detail. It was a little bit more work for sure, but that's usually what gives you a better end result. I just like having this detail line. Some people might not like it, where it changes from a rib steel to a soffit panel, but I kind of like it. It'd be really nice to get these post wrapped. It's all in the details. Lots of detail work just to do an overhang. Our life would have been so much easier if this was all a wall. If there was a drop header here, things would have been so much easier, but you know what they say, sometimes what's easy is not always good, and what's good is not always easy. So sometimes you take the hard route. Okay, I just got back from my shop and I went ahead and made up the post wraps that are gonna go on these posts behind me. And remember, we had to take out a couple posts, so I wanted to beef up the posts themselves and add some structure. So what I did was I made a post wrap out of 2x treated material, so it's going to be really beefed up, and I'll show you what we're doing. What I did was I made up a set of L post wraps with treated lumber, and I got one set for each post. And what I'll do is I'll just two-piece these, so it's going to be 2x10 that I ripped down to 8.5, and that was so that I could get an 8.5 dimension by an 8.5 dimension. That way the post would look mostly square. I didn't want it to look odd, and if I were to just add a maybe a ply on the back or something, it would really not make sense. So my goal was, I'm more worried about the stiffness of the post this way, so I wanted to laminate a column on the front, or a post, and if I did that, it just wouldn't, you know, 4.5 inches wouldn't really add a whole lot of strength. And if I did one on the front and the back, it would make it really wide, or really deep, but narrow. So I wanted to make it look symmetrical, so what I did was I ripped a 2x10 for the face on both sides, and I ripped it down to 8.5. So when I add a 2x here and a 2x here, it'll be 8.5 this way, and 8.5 this way. Well, there you go. That's the first column we finished up. And you can see now what we were doing there. We just wanted to kind of oversize it while adding some strength. So by getting this ply here in the front underneath that beam and that beam, you know, this was all kind of afterthought, but I think it turned out quite well. Got a double wrap, that way, you know someone's gonna hit these things. I'm liking that finish. I think it turned out pretty good. It's a heck of a nice place to put your leftover machinery, stuff like that. Well, that's just super frustrating. Greg went and got the second set of trims, and we were able to get one of them done, and it was tough. It looks good, but we really fought it. The problem is twofold. One, these trims, this dimension was supposed to be 4 3/8 minimum, but loose That way it would go around these posts, which are 4 3/8. But the problem is, you get like right here where this post is opened up just a 1/16 of an inch. I needed a little bit of slop in these post wraps, so they couldn't be exactly 4 3/8. Like that was the dimension I was wrapping, and I guess I just didn't convey that perfectly. I understand. I told them 4 3/8. I said, but that's minimum. Make it loose and err on the side of bigger. That way we have a little bit of slop. I can't really get too mad because they're dead nuts 4 3/8. Both sides, everything. So they did a perfect job bending them. I was hoping that they would bend them looser than 4 3/8. Needless to say, I just spent my afternoon just almost cussing and fighting and trying to get it to work because I hate oil can, and if you try to force that smaller profile over top of a larger piece of wood or material, it gets wavy and it just looks like garbage. And so now I'm super frustrated. It's Friday. I was hoping to wrap this up, and we're gonna have to order some more trim and be back here. But tomorrow, good news, Saturday morning, they're gonna pour the concrete here inside the shop. So I'm gonna come over for that, take some video hopefully, and so we'll see you guys tomorrow.